All right, I want to talk about how we would go about cutting the stringers. First thing you're going to want to do is crown the lumber up. As weight gets applied to the wood, and in theory, as gravity gets applied to the wood, if there's a crown of the lumber, it's going to want to straighten out if you've got that crown going up. Okay, so crown your lumber up and make this the top of the stringer where you're going to cut out your treads and risers. Get your framing square out, get your stair gauges out, and you can set the stair gauges. Let me move my picture out of the way here. You can set the stair gauges on one side to the unit rise and set the stair gauge to the other side for the unit run. It can be on either side of that framing square as long as they're both on the same side. And then it can get a little tricky because if we just go out and buy 2x12 dimensional lumber, they usually have an eased edge, and it's difficult getting a straight line or a square edge on that piece of lumber. It's difficult sometimes determining exactly where 10 inches is, 7 inches is, whatever your dimensions are. So what I would do is I would set those stair gauges to what I'm pretty sure are the right spots, trace a couple out, and see how it works out. If you end up being a little over on your run, then you can adjust, slide that stair gauge in a little bit, or vice versa. If you're a little under, you can extend it out a little bit. But the key thing is having these stair gauges on the same side of the framing square, and then what you're going to do is basically trace this triangle out on the piece of wood. Okay, so this is set to the unit rise. Let's say it's 7. This is set to the unit run. Let's say that's 10. Okay, I'm going to trace a line there. I'm going to trace a line there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this framing square down. So where that point ended with my unit run, I'm going to start over with the unit rise. And then we're going to trace the unit rise, and we're going to trace the unit run, and we're going to slide it back down. Okay? All right. So I talked a little bit about this on exterior stairs, taking into account the finished floor thickness. So what you need to do every time you build a set of stairs is you need to adjust the bottom of the stringer. It's called dropping the stringer for the tread thickness and the finished floor thickness. And what you're going to do is you're going to, after you've laid this out, okay, you've got your unit run and your unit rise laid out on the piece of wood, you're going to draw a line where you're subtracting the tread thickness off of that set of stairs. And then you're going to draw another line where you're adding back in the floor thickness. Okay? So sometimes they just cancel out, especially in an interior staircase. We're going to add 3/4 thick material for the treads. So I'm going to subtract that from the bottom of my stair stringer. But then I'm going to add 3/4 material down here on the finished floor. So I'm going to add that back in. So in that case, you could just do nothing and it would work out just fine. Okay. Where it becomes problematic is where you're adding something for the tread thickness and not adding anything for the finished floor. And it becomes very glaring on a deck. Okay, so let's just use this as an example. Okay, I've got a 7-inch rise. This is my stringer, and it's all just rough cut. Everything's 7 inches. Okay, I'm using 2x decking for all of my treads, and I add 1.5 inch tread thickness on top of this riser. Okay, all of a sudden, this dimension is 8.5. Okay, it started out 7. I added 1.5 inches on here. Now it's 8.5. Okay. Since I added this 1.5 inch thickness on top of this tread, all of a sudden this riser is now 5.5. Oh no. Okay. Don't worry about it, because then we're going to add another, where'd my cursor go? We're going to add another tread here, and now all of a sudden we're back to 7. Okay. We've added 1.5 inch tread here. This riser's become 5.5. That's okay. We're going to add another tread thickness here. That's going to make it 7 again. Okay, everything's great. Everything's working out, except for we've got this problem here where this is 8.5. And then once we get up here, okay, we're adding 1.5 inches here. And then this is 5.5. And then hopefully we're adding something here, but sometimes not, depending on how this has been, figured out. If it's attaching, like we were in the example we were talking about earlier, where it's just attaching to the floor framing, okay, we're not going to add anything up here. Okay, so let's say we've added this tread, and then this is going to be the finished floor up here. All of a sudden that's shorter. Okay, we can fix both of those problems though if we cut 1.5 inches off the bottom of the stringer. Okay, so remember, this was 1.5 inches too tall. This was 8.5. This was potentially going to finish at 5.5 inches. Okay, if we cut the bottom off this thing, we drop the entire structure down 1.5 inches. And then this is 5.5 inches tall. It's represented in this picture. We add that 1.5 inches to that, and then we have a normal riser height. Okay. All right. Depending on how we're going to attach the riser at the top, we may have to make an adjustment to the stringers. So let's say, again, our stringers are just attaching to the second floor, and there's not going to be any riser material added on here. Okay, it's just going to be sheetrock, or I don't really know what the case may be. It's going to depend on your particular situation. Sometimes you're going to have to shorten this stringer the thickness of a riser material, okay? Because just like how we kept stacking treads on top of everything, we're also stacking risers on top of everything. And if we're not, so here's an example. This is a 10-inch tread. We add a 3/4 inch riser on the front here, and oh no, it's 10 3/4. Don't worry, we're going to add another riser here. And now we've added 3/4 here, we made it 10 3/4, but then we added another 3/4 here, and now it's back to being 10 inches. Okay, unless on this last one we're not adding a riser here, then we would need to subtract the thickness of this. Okay, so if we added a riser here and we weren't adding one here, then this tread would be deeper than all of the other treads. So we would shorten the length of that by 1 riser thickness. Okay. All right. So we've drawn everything out on our stringers. We're going to cut close to the line with our circular saw and then finish the cut with the jigsaw. I would say this is really critical with a set of stairs. We don't want to overcut with the skill saw. We don't want to come in here and cut this thing out really deep, because you see how we started out with a 2x12 and then we cut these triangles out, and all of a sudden this has gotten quite a bit narrower. So if we overcut this thing by too much, just so that we avoid having to get another tool out, we're going to really weaken the structure here. All right, so I've kind of danced around this like the entire lecture, and when I upload a video of myself actually building a set of stairs, it'll be for the deck, and I will show how the stringers can be housed into the framing. Okay, so that's one thing we can do. We can frame it into the upper floor framing. Maybe we're just going to attach it to the wall. Simpson makes a hanger that you can nail to the wall, nail into some blocks or studs behind it, and it's adjustable to account for the bevel of the stairs. Another thing that's really common in the video you're going to see at the end of this is just nailing a piece of 3/4 inch plywood to the floor framing, and then that can hang down however far, and then you nail through that hanger board into the back of the stringers. And that's a totally appropriate way of attaching a set of stairs. Let's say there's going to be a full wall right here. You can just nail a 2x4 ledger onto that wall. Maybe it's got a slope ripped onto the ledgers that you can then nail those stringers into. Or better yet, tack your stringers in place and then nail some blocks in between those stringers so that you can face nail through the blocks into the wall framing and then face nail through the stringers into the side of the blocks. And again, we always want to notch the bottom of that of those stringers over a kickboard to prevent any lateral thrust that might happen. Think about wall finish before you start nailing your stringers on, or at least have a plan to account for wall thickness. So what's really nice is either sheetrocking this wall first, at least just screwing the sheetrock on and then attaching your stair stringers, or leaving a space, like, nailing a 2x4 or not a 2x4, a 1/2 inch piece of plywood onto the wall first and then nailing your stringer into that so that you can tuck the sheetrock in behind those stair stringers. Somebody learned the hard way a long time ago to do this. Okay, that hasn't been conveyed to everyone. So I've seen quite a few jobs where people are like laying out the stairs on a piece of drywall and trying to cut each tread and riser on the piece of drywall to fit over the stairs, and then somehow trying to like tape and finish the sheetrock around those stairs. Okay, that is the worst way to do it. Okay, you want to either just rock that wall first or leave a space to tuck your sheetrock behind. On a nice finished staircase, you're going to put a skirt board in. Okay, that's this piece of material here. And so they're laying this on there, getting ready to trace this out. That's the way, again, you don't want to do that. You want to leave a space for 3/4 inch space for that skirt board so that you can build your stringers, drop that skirt board in, and then butt your finished treads and risers to that skirt board. And you don't have to try and make some intricate cuts that perfectly line up with all this stuff. All right. Oops. As we are building our treads and risers, usually what I like to do is put the risers on first. Most of the time the risers are 1 by material, and then this is another reason why we want to get closer to 7 with our riser height. If we have a riser height that's around 7, we can get 1 by 8 material and rip that down. Okay, 1 by 8 material is generally going to end at about 7¼ inches. So if we are maxing out our riser height at 7¾ then maybe we're having to upgrade to 1 by 10 and then ripping that down. So just, I guess, a little trick. If you can keep it close to 7, then you can just use 1 by 8 material for your risers. When we nail the treads on, they're going to butt into the face of the riser, and they're going to cap the top of the riser. Okay, that's generally how I like to build these things. And then we're always going to have a nosing unless it's concrete or unless the treads are deeper than 11 inches. So the nosing should extend 3/4 to 1.25 inches past the face of the riser. And again, it seems like it would just cause people to trip. But supposedly it acts as like a visual clue that you need to pick your foot up and get your foot out of the way because there's a step right here. Okay. Depending on what kind of finish you want to have with these stairs, like it's sometimes common on like a high level of finish to have these treads and have the nosing extend out further, and then you nail a piece of cove molding or something like that to the face of the riser, and the nosing extends beyond that cove molding or something to that effect. We generally want to glue everything, depending on what we're doing. If we're building a set of stairs inside, we're going to glue it, and we're going to either try and conceal the screws somehow or use a finish nailer or something like that. But we want to glue it because we don't want it to squeak later on. If we're just building a set of stairs for a deck outside or something like that, we're not going to glue it, but we'll screw everything. We'll face screw everything. You'll see in the video that's coming up here pretty soon, the guy uses glue blocks. So he cuts some little blocks and glues them in so that they're glued to in between the stringers. Okay, so there's a glue block here and a glue block here, and it's glued to the riser, the back of the riser, and it's glued to the bottom of the tread. And so it really kind of ties everything together. All right. This is a video that I really like. It's another old fine home building video. It's a really good one, and this guy's kind of a master stair builder. So watch this, enjoy this, and I hope you've enjoyed everything else. Thank you.